Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. European foreign ministers meeting in Cyprus have signalled tougher action against Russia, even as security tensions rise after a drone strike in Romania and new diplomatic strains emerge between Ukraine and Poland. We're joined by Olena Lennon. She's assistant professor at the Department of National Security, University of New Haven, to unpack the situation. Olena, welcome back to TVP World, and thank you for taking the time.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
So, this informal meeting of foreign ministers of EU member states in Cyprus, what has the agenda been? It ended last week, at the end of last week. What's the agenda been? What outcomes have been achieved?
Well, it was mostly symbolic in nature. It doesn't have any, legal authority or power in terms of signing agreements or, enforcing any sanction packages or anything like that. But it was still important in that it was a forum in which European leaders reconfirmed and reaffirmed their commitment to supporting Ukraine. And I think one of the strongest messages that came out of the meeting was precisely the idea that Europe is not a neutral party to the war between Russia and Ukraine. It cannot be a neutral negotiator or mediator, because it is very much on the side of Ukraine. And I thought that was one of the strongest messages that came out of the meeting, is precisely this reinforcement that Russia should not expect European leaders to nominate a delegate or a representative that would mediate this war between Russia and Ukraine, because Europeans are not unbiased, or they're not neutral. They see Russia as their own enemy, and they're absolutely on the side of Ukraine. So that was good. Now, as far as any tangible outcomes or any pragmatic solutions or decisions, I think the more pragmatic outcome was the fact that for the first time, we heard, not for the first time, but more concretely, we heard conversations about the 21st sanctions package that would put even more pressure on Russia, given escalation in Kiev and across Ukraine, and also in Romania, of course, with casualties now in Romania. So I thought, between Europe reinforcing the idea that they're not neutral, that they do not seek negotiations with Russia. They see Russia as an enemy, and they will continue supporting Ukraine. That's one. And then the second outcome is the idea that the existing pressure is not enough, and that it's time for Europeans to go after Russia's shadow fleet, secondary providers, various financial and shipping companies that enable the imports of military technology to Russia, and also that enable the operations of Russia's shadow oil tankers. So that was positive, but again, whether any action will actually follow remains to be seen.
Indeed it does. Let me take your points one at a time. You talk about European unity in support of Ukraine, but that hasn't always been the case. Viktor Orban famously was always a bit of a sticking point. Has that changed since Orban lost the elections in Hungary? Are we seeing more unity amongst the EU member states?
Well, we're seeing a different message coming out of Hungary. I'm not so sure that the entire Europe is more united, because we're still we still have Slovakia and other countries that are not necessarily on board with sanctions or with accelerating Ukraine's accession to the EU. But one step at a time. I think the fact that Peter Magyar is more open to cooperating with the EU on sanctions is already a good message, and the fact that Magyar unblocked aid to Ukraine is also a good message, and also the fact that Peter Magyar was actually because he lifted the ban imposed by Viktor Orban on the 20th sanctions package was also a move in the right direction. Now, should we expect a dramatic shift in Hungarian foreign policy? I'm not so sure, because Hungary remains opposed to Ukraine joining the European Union. So that hasn't changed. I think what has changed is the fact that the European Union is more united in its ability to provide financial support to Ukraine and also in imposing sanctions on Russia. But as far as any, again, dramatic shifts in support of Ukraine's accelerated accession to the EU, or any more direct NATO involvement in defense of Ukraine, that is unchanged.
Right.
Again, but we're still moving. It's still better than it was before, with Peter Major now kind of lifting blocks on previous reforms.
Understood. Now, the other area, of course, is the sanctions, the 21st sanctions package. And from what you tell us, it's really talking about the same things, blocking financial flows, stopping the shadow fleet, stopping intermediaries from facilitating transactions. But the EU's been talking about these sanctions right from the beginning. Why hasn't it happened effectively enough so that they're now talking about the 21st package?
Well, that is $1 million question. Enforcement mechanisms remain poor, remain really weak. I think the 21st sanctions package also includes some of the Belarusian oligarchs and business officials and politicians into among individuals sanctioned by the European Union. So that's changed. But I think that is my understanding on the 21st package is that you're right. It's more of the same, but on a bigger scale, because they're really trying to go after various financial institutions, banks, shipping companies, insurance companies that are enabling the sale of Russian oil onto global markets or the delivery of military components into Russia. So these are secondary and various intermediaries, secondary providers, but also various transfer networks that are not first degree of separation from Russia, but second and third degree of separation. So various smaller actors that facilitate the shipment of oil that is under sanctions or the import of components into Russia. And a lot of these companies are actually dual-use components. So these are civilian companies or that manufacture civilian products but contain microchips or other technology that is then used in the production of weapons in Russia. So, those are a little bit, less obvious when it comes to being able to enforce current sanctions. And my understanding is that the European Union is now including smaller actors and various service companies who enable the Russian economy, but don't directly participate in these transactions. That's at least my read of it. But again, all of this is happening in the context of Ukrainian long-range sanctions that are probably doing more work nonetheless. And it's just additional note that I think that the 21st package also comes in the context of not just escalation in airstrikes against Ukraine and then Romania, but also in the fact that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz allowed Russia to generate approximately $150 million additional dollars in revenue. And I think the combination of all those factors make it urgent for Europeans to start putting a cap, to close all those gaps that enable the Russian economy.
Understood. Now, 20 packages have already been passed. They don't seem to have made much difference to Russia's ability to cause mischief through hybrid warfare. And that includes what you've already mentioned, the drones that crashed in Romania and caused casualties. Now, talk us through first of all, the political implications, and then we'll come to the military implications in just a second of that.
Well, first of all, I don't think that the sanctions, the 20 packages of sanctions, as you said, have not been completely useless. All right. I mean, they have chipped away from the Russian economy, and that's why they're so desperate. Right. I think Russia desperately punishing Ukrainian civilians is a sign of just how frustrated they are, being unable to advance on the ground or achieve their military political objectives. So I think every little bit helps. And I think that even though the sanctions have not stopped Russia, but they have made it more difficult for Russia to generate revenue to continue with its military campaign. Now, that said, while Europeans are, deliberating and configuring new economic measures, Ukrainians are wasting no time because they understand that they have to take matters into their own hands. So they are imposing long-range sanctions on Russia by striking as far as 1,000 kilometers from the line of separation and striking oil refineries and pumping stations in Russia. And those are more effective in denying Russia that oil revenue than any economic sanctions. But at the end of the day, it's a combination of all of those measures, right? It's not just the military or just the economic or just the diplomatic fronts. They all work in unison.
So understood, I think, but what's the impact of the Russian drones that entered Romania and caused casualties?
Well, first of all, it was only a matter of time before the debris would actually create some damage on the ground. So this is definitely not the first time Russian drones entered Romanian space. As a matter of fact, since 2022, at least 50 such incursions have been recorded in the NATO airspace, and Romania has borne the brunt of those. Now, the fact that, again, it led to casualties on the ground, even though they're not lethal, but nonetheless, one would think that would trigger a more dramatic response. But I think the response has been quite muted because it is perceived as an accident, not as a deliberate act of aggression against Romania. So definitely Article 5 is not on the table at all. I mean, there have been conversations in the diplomatic condemnation and recalling of an ambassador, but also Romania obviously called for more air defense to be pulled from its allies to the Romanian border, and those are all justifiable, legitimate. But look, those calls for more air defense and for layered air defense, anti-drone interceptors, they have been going on for quite some time because Russia's threat did not manifest itself yesterday. It has been ongoing. I think it makes the threat a little bit more real for NATO countries, especially eastern flank of NATO. But I don't think that this most recent incident will lead to any dramatic shifts in military spending or support of Ukraine, because the priority for Patriot missiles remains in the Middle East. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of Patriot missiles in the world, even if Ukraine and NATO allies could pay for them. The U.S. just does not have enough.
Right.
So I don't think that the incident in Romania will change much of anything.
Well, we shall wait and see. As always, we're keeping a close eye on what happens. Professor Olena Lennon, as always, thank you very much for sharing your analysis with our audience, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.